Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Trekkie and Beyond. I'm Monica Pinkett.
And I'm Andrea. And so there is a lot to unpack in this episode. So let's go ahead and get started. While leaving a Starfleet meeting, Captain Lorca is taken prisoner by a Klingon ship. And we get to meet two new characters this episode, a criminal mastermind named Harry Mudd and another Starfleet captive, a lieutenant named Ash Tyler. And then while all that is happening to him, back on the Discovery, we see with Michael, along with all the other engineers, Tilly and Paul, and the med bay's Dr. Culber, they're at odds with First Officer Saru about using the Ripper for the spore drive. And so this episode was titled Choose Your Pain, and they titled it perfectly because there was so much in this episode. So before we jump into like everything, because there's so much to talk about, let's start with the opening scene. What did you think about that vision, nightmare, dream, whatever you want to call it, that Michael had at the beginning of episode 5?
It's interesting because once again, we're seeing more and we're experiencing more of her feelings towards this whole journey, this whole adventure, like coming of age of Michael. So there was that, and she was in pain because it was an out-of-body experience from Michael, and she was receiving torture the same way that Ripper was experiencing in the last episode. And ended up being that she was torturing herself because she was at the control of that. So that was like, for me, that pain that I saw there instantly connected me to the title, Choose Your Pain. So I'm excited to talk about this episode and Ripper and everything else.
So for me, that opening scene was almost sort of like foreshadowing for me. Like I saw it and I thought, okay, this is going to mean something later on in the episode. I don't know what it's going to mean, but it's going to mean something later on in the episode. I almost thought it was almost like Ripper. Like my initial thought was Ripper was like putting that into her head so that way she could feel what it felt, because I don't know what Ripper is, what it felt while it was in the spore drive. And so I felt it was almost like a foreshadowing, and it sort of was. But I really did think Ripper I really did think that Ripper put it in her head. So I could be completely wrong with that, but that scene was very shocking and eye-opening. And then it did like a whole left to Captain Lorca.
Right.
Which is a very hard left as well.
Right. Before we jump to Captain Lorca, I just want to mention, I think Burnham has a lot of experience with, is it xenotherapy? Like the research of creatures and animals and how they behave. And so I'm wondering if that experience, her background there, is impacting this as well. Yeah. Just like her scientific research in that field, more so than her Vulcan science education.
And then it's also interesting because of her Vulcan background, her Vulcan the way she was raised, the fact that she was having such an emotional reaction to what was happening in the Ripper, because we saw that in episode 4, and then now we're seeing it in the dream that she's actually starting to feel things. And not to say that she can't, but like she tries to portray herself as someone who's like removed, a true scientist who's really removed from what she's doing emotionally and is focusing on the task at hand. But for this one, she is getting very emotionally involved, and I am loving seeing this side of Michael. I am really loving it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next scene that we had, and that was with Captain Lorca being at the Starfleet meeting with all the other captains and the Admiral. And Captain Lorca is getting shut down. The spore drive is getting shut down because he's using it too much. And you can definitely see that he's upset about that. But what did you think about that scene, about the meeting between him and the Admiral?
So I was thinking of it in reference to a student being called to the principal's office, or you're called to your boss's office, because it was an in-person meeting. It's not like they could have sent over a hologram or a pre-recorded message, but they asked for him to travel over by himself, a solo mission, to meet with them in person, to give them his message give them this message about standing down, let them do research to find out how they can replicate this for other Starfleet ships. And then also the fact that they are trying to just ensure that the USS Discovery is not picked up by another like an enemy that wants wants this technology. So they want him to stand still. The USS Discovery. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, of course. But, yes.
And then we also see that Starfleet is looking for more organisms like Ripper, and to use it for more spore drives, because Lorca is a needle in a haystack, or he's not the needle. Sorry, that's the wrong analogy. He is the golden goose. He is the only one of his kind. Lorca's ship is the only one in Starfleet that can do what it can do. So you're right. It's like being pulled to the principal's office, but at the same time, it's like, hey, you're too smart, so we're going to hold you back so everyone else can catch up. And it's like a slap on the hand, but did he really deserve it? So Starfleet is sort of like flip-flops for me on how they do things, because they wanted him to go ahead and get the spore drive and excel, and he did it. And now, okay, well, now we need you to stop because everyone else has to catch up, because now you're doing too much and we don't want people to find out. So it's sort of like they can't be undercover if everyone can do it, almost, you know?
Right. They know that there's a bit risk to have USS Discovery out there all by itself with the only resource like this. And it seems like the Admiral had another discussion that she wanted to have with Lorca about Michael, and whether Michael is subconsciously, like not subconsciously, but just having her presence there undermines Starfleet rules and regulations because she was court-martialed. So
that is actually very true. And I really did like Lorca's response, my ship, my way. Like, I have full autonomy to do, he's like, I have full autonomy to do whatever I want to do on my ship for this war. That was the rule. That was the power that I was given. And
but I'm gonna pull a Saru here, because I'm gonna raise my finger like he did later on in the episode, because Lorca said the same thing to Paul about Paul's research regarding the spore drive, and Paul was like, I'm going to take my spore drive research and take it back to Starfleet and whatever. And he's like, no, Starfleet owns your research. It's going to stay right here. You're not leaving Discovery with that. So it's not really my ship, my rules, because that wasn't really the same type of rules that was played for Paul. So I think Lorca's just like aggressive, assertive with his rules, and I think there's something more. There's a lot more to Lorca that I'm interested. I'm rubbing my chin because I think he's mysterious and up to no good. So we'll find out more.
He's Lucius Malfoy, so he's always never up to any good. But let's like stick on the little part where it's like the Admiral could not tell him to send Michael back. Right. Like, that was actually, to me, that sort of stood out, because an Admiral's above him.
Right.
She should have more power to overrule him if need be. And she either didn't because he like made her believe in him, or she couldn't. And what does that say for the power that she's supposed to have if she really can't overrule a captain in that? Because like, it's not like she's overruling him on some small little everyday task. He has a convicted Starfleet felon basically on his ship working and not serving out her sentence. How does that look? And she could overrule him and say, no, there is never going to be an example. There's never going to be any leeway for someone who's a mutineer. Like, you're stuck in jail forever. Nothing will ever get you out, not even war. And she didn't. So it's like, either she did it because she couldn't, and if she didn't have the power to do that, what does that say for reigning in Lorca? Truly?
Yeah, I wish the episode was a little longer, because I
Mhm.
don't think a conversation with your supervisor in which you went above your supervisor, you did something like that, that could just end with being by saying my rules. Like, I
Mhm.
don't think it really, I don't think she left the room at that point
Yeah.
in time, right? So I don't think the conversation was over. I think it continued. We just don't know what happened. I wish I was a fly on the wall in that situation, and
So very
learn a
much.
little. Yes. He
Okay.
must have something over her. Anyway.
He probably does because he's Lucius Malfoy, and Lucius Malfoy always has something up his little long sleeves.
Yeah.
I apologize, Star Trek people. I know that he's not, but in my mind, he'll always be that person. But moving on. So as Lorca is leaving Starfleet, he's on his little transport vessel, and he is being kidnapped by a Klingon vessel. Now, Monica and I have a little bit of a difference on who the Klingons are. So if you're listening, please comment which Klingon vessel you think it is, because it wasn't. I'm not sure about it, but we see that he is kidnapped by Klingons, and his driver on the little transport ship is killed, and he's thrown into jail or their prison, their brig, and we meet Harry Mudd. So first of all, I love the actor who played him. They did a really good job casting Rain. I love him. But what did you think about that whole scene? Because when he's in there, within like 2 minutes of meeting Harry, the Klingons come in. Harry points to another guy who's in there, and we either see the guy either get killed by that kick to the face or seriously injured and dragged out of the room. So what did you think about the initial meeting there?
Right. So I knew it was a dark place. I have to admit, I did not make the connection with Harry Mudd at first, because his name was like said really quickly, and Flora. I don't know. He mentioned another first name. I guess his legal name, but I did not make that connection until later on in the episode, and with assistance of my husband Rod. But I just thought that this is interesting. There's this sketchy person that seemed to kind of know the rules of prison and how to get away with certain things, and poking around. Like, just some people just are mischievous and just able to get around in those dark environments. And he just seemed to be one of those. What do you think about him?
I initially was like, you know what? Because every character you play is shady, I'm not going to trust you, even though I know who the character is. But like, that actor has played some shady people in the past, and he plays it really well. And I didn't trust him, and even before I realized who he was, because I didn't realize who he was until after the show, and I was Googling characters. I was like, oh yeah, that was that guy. So but during the episode, I was like, I don't really trust you yet, because you're trying to come off as a friend, but you're too eager to let other people die. And I feel like if he was a more of an honest person, he would have felt a little bit bad about giving up the other dude to either be tortured or killed, because I don't really know what that kick is, but I feel like if you're laying down on an angle and someone kicks your head and your neck goes like that, I don't think you're going to survive that. So
right. And we also see another use of choose your pain there, right? From the Klingons, in which they walk into the room, the Klingon soldiers walk into the room and ask the other prisoners to choose their pain, basically choose someone there that they'll sacrifice in order to keep everyone else alive that's there. And that's hard, because in the end, it's going to be whoever's left standing, so everyone. But it's pain because you're kind of choosing someone else to die, and then that person's death. So all of that is hurtful. So everyone who's new to Star Trek, yes, Google Harry Mudd. He is in the original series and Next Generation. Have you seen him in anything else? Any other Star Trek?
I honestly don't remember if I have. He could have been, but I think it's just those two.
Yeah. But he's creepy. Sketchy too. Yeah. Good. But it's nice to see characters that they tie in to throughout the other
different
connected
universes.
Series. Right.
Yes. Or I guess all the same universe, different series. You're right. Yes. Series is the right word. So then before the Klingons come back, Captain Lorca runs into Starfleet Lieutenant Ash Tyler, and he's been there for about 7 months. And even though he didn't even realize he's been there for that long. And then we find out a little tidbit of information because Captain Lorca susses out there's no way you can survive Klingon torture for 7 months. What's really going on? And we find out that Ash says that the female captain or maybe it was just a female Klingon, it could be that too, took a liking to him. And that's why he's still alive. And there's a little scene later where Captain Lorca goes on the female captain and says, we don't have enough equipment for you. So that's a whole different... I was like, oh, okay. You can't really make... Those plugs don't match. So I wonder...
He's talking about phasers and other things like that. Yeah,
sure, totally. This is a total family-friendly show. But this is that was a little bit of interesting tidbit of information because I really wouldn't think Klingons would use humans for that because it seems like, they hate humans or Starfleet. So I feel like I was very shocked by that information, by that little tidbit. I was really shocked. I did not see that coming for this version of Klingons, who are so hateful.
Right. And that takes you into another dark place that we're hoping this series is not going into.
Because here's the thing is, though, when Ash said that, you heard a woman screaming in the background, and you heard other men screaming in the background, and you heard them screaming, no, please. So I feel like that wasn't a coincidence that they put that soundtrack over those words that were being said. So I was like, okay, this went dark fast.
Yes. And I can't imagine that torture. And it's interesting to see it on the other side for a male instead of a female. I mean, it can happen both ways. Sex crimes happen in all directions, unfortunately. It's interesting because we've also, I think that's Laurel. And I think we've seen her in other places in which she's more passive to Vought. So I don't know. And I don't know if maybe, I've forgotten the name of I guess our sex crime victim, Ash. The way where Ash, if Ash is mistaken and she's not the captain, I don't know, but that was a pretty painful visual. They end up taking Lorca in and torturing him a little bit with light directly into his eyes. So it seems like they're into pain and torture.
Yeah, that's why he said no one survives it for that long. But during the torture of Captain Lorca, we also realize he's really smart because when he gets back to his cell, he goes straight for Harry Mudd and punches him and realizes Harry's feeding them information. Yeah. And that is how Harry has survived so long, because he's teaming up with the Klingons. And then Harry Mudd gives some very important information that we didn't know about Captain Lorca, that Captain Lorca, instead of letting his crew to be captured by Klingons and tortured to death in a slow death, because that's what Klingons do, he blew them up when they were going to be overtaken by the Klingons. He blew up his own people. And he ended up getting another ship, which makes me think, what was Starfleet thinking?
Right. How did he get out and the rest of his crew
couldn't get out?
Everyone else died. And he destroyed the ship. He killed them all. And so that makes me wonder, how the heck did he get in charge of Discovery? Why would you ever put him in charge of another ship
if his go-to option is to kill everyone instead of letting them survive and possibly maybe finding a way out.
Right. And maybe this is also why he's comfortable with Michael Burnham, because like
he understands hard decisions.
Right.
And they both have a type of pain. That is
and
true.
Forgiveness there to be able to move on. He wasn't court-martialed, so we don't know what's there, but that's a interesting background story. I am interested in learning a lot more about that.
And yeah, because we found out that happened a month after the Battle of the Binary Stars. And so he's only had the discovery for about 5 months then, because the war started 7 months ago, and then that happened a month after. He's only had the discovery for 5 months. I feel like that is such a quick turnaround, even being wartime, to put him back in charge of all these people when the last time you did, you opted to kill them instead of letting them be captured. And what makes it a little bit worse for me is that in this episode, when he's able to escape with Ash, it's like the people maybe his crew members, some of them could have escaped.
Right.
Not everyone had to die.
I was surprised when they were running down the corridor to escape, and Ash fell. Lorca said, "I'll come back for you." Because I was thinking, he doesn't have a history of coming back.
I was like, he's not coming back. He's not coming back.
I was thinking, oh no, he's back to the prison. But he did. He did return. He picked up Ash, and they were able to escape. And I don't know how they were able to fly out on a Klingon
vessel.
Escape is great. How does he know how to control their ships and fly there? I have no idea, but it happened.
I will backtrack because I did jump forward a little quick. I will backtrack. So when Ash and Captain Lorca, when they were escaping, and Harry Mudd realized that Ash could have defended himself this entire time, and they really could have fought. And he looks at him, he's like, I always knew it was a 2-man job to get out of here. I was waiting on the right man. And it's like, Harry, this is what you get for being shady. And Ash knew you were shady this entire time, but he wasn't going to trust you to try and escape. Ash would have rather died in Klingon hands than try to escape with Harry. And that tells me more. That told me more about Harry's character, that someone wasn't even willing to try and escape with you because that's how much he did not trust you.
Right.
Like I like that line that Ash said. I really did.
Right. I like Ash, and Ash seemed to be able to use his like Starfleet, like just survival skills to give some body language to Captain Lorca. It's like, okay, we have a plan. We're not going to say it out loud, and we'll get out of here together. So that's good.
They escape, and before we say what happens next, we're going to backtrack a couple more minutes in the episode, and we're going to go to this discovery side of this episode because they tie in together at the end. So now, while Captain Lorca is going through all of this on the Klingon ship, we have First Captain Saru, or First Officer Saru is now the acting Captain Saru. And so we start off with Michael not knowing that Lorca was off ship or not back on the ship yet, coming to the bridge to talk to him. And Saru tells her, no, he's not here. He's been captured. We're trying to save him. And so she explains to Saru, we can't keep using Ripper because he's deteriorating with each use. She spoke to Medbay, and we meet, that's where we meet the Dr. Culber. I'm sorry. I'm a phonetic speaker, people, and if it doesn't look the way it's spelled, my brain does not compute.
By the way, people might remember this actor because he was in My So-Called Life from the 90s. It's a 90s show. Yeah.
I loved him. He's cute. So we have the doctor, we have Medbay, and we have Michael going talking to Saru and saying we can't do this because it's going to eventually kill Ripper, and we don't have anything to replace him, and he feels pain. Like every time they do it, he's getting weaker and weaker. And Saru says, well, nothing I can do about that right now, basically because we need to save Captain Lorca. What did you think about that scene of Michael talking to Saru? Like, how did you feel? Because I felt like Saru was sort of lording it over her, that he had more power.
For sure. I think he was all hyped on the whole, ooh, I'm acting captain thing. I have to be all like official. And he was also not sure of himself to the point where he had to ask the computer what are the qualities and traits of an excellent captain. But you could tell that he was worried about Michael, and he also did not want to experience the loss of Lorca on his watch, like what happened before. So I think it was just really soon after Giorgio's death that he still probably had some post-traumatic stress. It was like, I can't mess this up. We need to do whatever we can, even if they're going to like, even if Ripper is not going to survive. Like, he wasn't thinking holistically about this. He was mostly thinking about Captain Lorca.
And also, Saru gives us a little bit more of an insight into why he's been acting the way he's been acting towards Michael. He admits that he is not afraid of her, but he is angry at her, and he's still angry, and he hasn't let go of that anger because he always wanted to be Captain Giorgio's first officer. And because of, again, hill I would die on, is not really her fault, Michael's actions, he never got the chance. And again, not Michael's fault, because there's a whole little gray area. This is the hill that I would die on, people. But he still holds that anger towards Michael about that. And so he goes to like, it's that anger that's driving him to sort of like not be as understanding as I think he could be. So they get the location of where Captain Lorca could possibly be. And so he has them jump out there. And the entire engineering team sees Ripper in so much pain, to the point where after they jump, he releases all the liquid from his body and goes into like a hibernation because he's done. And that was such a 180 to see how they reacted to him versus that the first time we meet him in episode 2 or 3. It was episode 3 we met him, I think. And yeah, it was episode 3 we met Ripper, where he was like killing everyone, and now we understand why he was ripping people apart.
Right.
To the point where they wanted to kill him, to now they're like, what are we doing? Like, are we monsters? Like, so what did you think about engineering in this episode, in that scene of what they're going through?
Right. I think we're seeing more team. We're seeing more crew now and experiencing them working together. They seem to have empathy for Ripper that's not experienced on the bridge. And Saru is thinking just of Ripper as a tool, just like as, I don't know, the lithium crystals, just not that he is a sentient being and that there's precious life there. And it's interesting that engineering has more empathy, and maybe because they're seeing Ripper on a regular basis. Because I think there was a scene in which Saru was like, "Oh, just rehydrate him." Like, just thought that was just a thing. It was like, no. So if it was that simple, I don't think they would be on the bridge talking about this. But that's where I could really tell that Saru is out of his league here in this captain's chair. And he was getting upset at engineering and med staff to the point in which he was raising his finger. He did not want to hear anyone that was against his view. He serious
hand to the face. Hand to the face.
Yeah.
Pause. I'm not talking to you. I was like, okay, sassy Saru. Who are you talking to?
He has serious attitude.
Yes,
he was not cool and calm, collected. He was so opposite of a captain. Yeah. Although he had some, like, he had the intellect. So some of the other character traits. So because he was able to, like, okay, let's work out type of trajectory and how far we could go to get this and that. But for his emotional intelligence, that was not there.
And so So all that happens, and then they see the Klingon ships. They see Lorca. They see the Klingon ships flying through space. They haven't figured out how to rehydrate Ripper yet. And Saru susses out that, hey, they're not acting like a normal, those ships aren't acting normal. And Lorca and Saru figures out that the first ship is their captain escaping.
Right.
And so he has them beam them aboard and says, okay, use the spore drive again. Is it ready? Engineering says yes. And you could hear it in his voice. Something was off when he said yes. And then they jump. And then we realize how he used the spore drive. This is the one time I had mad respect for Paul. Like, I didn't like Paul in the last couple episodes, but this episode, Paul and I, we're bae. He's my bae. Like, we became best friends. He didn't know it yet, but we became best friends on this episode because Paul injected himself with the DNA of Ripper and stood in place of Ripper in the machine, allowed himself to be stuck twice, stabbed, or wherever it was, and used, and experienced firsthand the pain that he was putting Ripper through so they could save the captain and the ship. I didn't expect that from Paul. I expected Michael to be the one to be the one in the machine.
Yeah. Right.
Because, like I said, from the beginning, that made me think foreshadowing. And it was sort of a foreshadow, but not for Michael. So
right.
When you saw that it was actually Paul.
Right. I was leaning like you were towards Michael. Now, Saru asked Michael to go to her
room and stay there.
Her room. And he had asked her to stand down before in this episode, and she didn't. And he was definitely placing some authority on her to, like, just wait. I'm not ready for you right now. Just like, you're grounded. Go to your room. So she was waiting it out. I was surprised to see Paul. I was also surprised because of his engineering background that they didn't have like more tests, like on, I don't know, some other avenues before him taking on this huge risk. That still, though, limits, I guess, their ability because they don't know exactly how this impacts Paul.
Yeah.
And if this that was their only DNA sample. Maybe they have more. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, they know they have it in the computer. They may not have it in real life, in real form, but they have the sequence of it. But I was thinking Michael was going to ignore what Saru said, run down and inject herself to sacrifice herself to save the ship. That is what I was expecting. I didn't expect Paul to survive. I really thought he was going to die after that. And then you have Captain Lorca meeting with Michael saying it's an order to find, and I order you to find a way to save Ripper. And to save Ripper, she lets him go. And I feel like that was
Saru.
Sorry, yes, you're right. Sorry, you're right. Saru ordered her to find a way to save Ripper. And in doing so, she let Ripper go. I wonder what the backlash for that's going to be, because they don't have another one of him. They don't have another, like, they know it can work on humans, but they're not going to put a human in there. They're not going to keep putting humans at risk for this. So I really wonder how that blowback is going to come back. And I feel like it's also because she's like, look, I'm already court-martialed. I'm never going to have freedom again off the ship anymore. Like, what are they going to do to me? Throw me back in jail?
Right.
So it's like,
I hope Tilly, her accomplice, doesn't get in trouble for this because Tilly helped out. But I don't think that was Saru's intent, like to make Ripper help. Like maybe go back to that forest area that had lots of the spore cores, or do something else to entertain Ripper. But I don't think Saru was thinking let Ripper go free, and how they were able to access this technology. But how Michael was able to access the bridge earlier, and I don't understand how she was able to do that and shock Saru. So I don't know. I would, if I were the Admiral, I would be highly upset. And they could have contacted the rest of Starfleet first before going to this extreme. This puts Michael into a whole different category. And I'm happy to see that the Ripper was happy. I'm just thinking this just changes their the technology options to explore how Ripper works with the spore core. Oh, goodness.
And then also, Michael ends up giving the telescope that Georgiou left her to Saru. And I feel like that was such a sweet moment. That's also showing that she's coming out of that Vulcan shell again. Because I will admit, I will say the episodes 1 and 2, before she got court-martialed, you could see her coming out of her Vulcan shell. And I feel like she probably went back into her Vulcan shell while she was in prison to like dissociate herself from what was going on around her, to like help her survive. And then being back around people in the ship, she's starting to care again like she did before. So we're seeing that side of her again. And she gave Saru the last thing from Georgiou, her telescope. And I felt like that was such a sweet scene.
Yeah, I think it was, there were several folds there. So it's to help mend their relationship. Mm-hmm. Also, I think to help Saru have closure with Georgiou, because he talked about how much he wanted to be Georgiou's understudy, to be the next number one underneath Georgiou, and he didn't have the opportunity, and he felt like Michael took that away from him. So the telescope is a view of the world, the view of the galaxy, view of the universe. So maybe this is a way of making that connection. And I think also the telescope was tough for Michael to accept and probably keep because of how Georgiou passed.
Yeah.
So it also helped her release probably these huge weights that were over on her shoulder about Georgiou's death. And Georgiou calling her the daughter that she never had and stuff. I was like, oh goodness. Yes.
We're not gonna cry today. We're not gonna cry today.
Very touching moment. There were some really good one-liners. One of these comes to mind from Michael. She said, the more you hurt someone, the less helpful they become. And she was hurting Ripper. She was hurting Saru. There was a lot of hurt going on throughout. And I think she was trying to help make their relationship whole, her relationship with Saru whole. And bottom line, Ripper's free. So he's whole. He's about as good as he's going to get.
I don't think that's the last we'll see of him, though. That's my thought process. I don't think that's the last we'll see of Ripper. I feel like he's probably going to come back and maybe save her at some point. I don't know when, but I feel like he might just come back randomly and save her, and we're like, what? Look at that! And I can come back to this episode and say, called it.
Speaking of call, I think it's definitely not the last we've seen of the Klingons or Harry Mudd.
Oh yeah, no, we are definitely going to see more of them. I wonder what's going to happen to Harry now that they've escaped, though. I wonder if he's going to come out with all his limbs intact, with the way they like to torture. So the last scene of this episode, we see that the Dr. Culber, I am so sorry, people. I don't know why I cannot say this person's name. And the engineer and Paul from engineering are a couple. And the doctor is scanning Paul to make sure that he's okay. He's like, I promise I'm fine. And the doctor is ripping into him because he's like, don't ever do that again. He's like, I didn't just do it for the captain. I did it because you're on this ship. Like, I did it for you too. And it's all like sweet and fluff. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I wanted you two to be a couple, but now I'm building that ship and I hope it stays afloat. Like, come on now. And then the very last scene, Paul is staring at himself in the mirror, walks away, and they turn back to the mirror, and Paul is still there, staring. And I am just like, what? Body snatchers? What is going on? Ghosts? What's going on? I know it's Star Wars. I mean, Star Trek is not that. But what did you think of that last final scene, and like that whole scene?
Yeah, I think he changed his DNA to accommodate like a tardigrade, a creature that they're not very familiar with, that travels light years.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, I don't know, this could go so many different ways. And they also like to leave us with these dangling carrots, these like this intrigue for the next episode. So I don't know, there's multiverse of him. I don't know if we don't know. He's sentient now. I don't know.
That's true, because he did mention that he didn't know like so much because he was connected, and I almost expected his eyes to do like to blink sideways, because he was staring so intently at himself. I really expected his eyes to like blink sideways, and so when that didn't happen, I was like, oh, he's fine. And they turned back to the mirror. It's like, he's not fine.
Right. Remember when he woke up? He was like unconscious there for a while, laying down, and he woke up and he was just in laughter. Like, yeah. And we had never seen that side of him before. He's been so serious until this moment. So this is also out of character. He just, his personality must have changed with this.
Yeah. So I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. So as we're wrapping this episode up, final thoughts on this episode. What did you think?
I thought this was an excellent episode. I could tell that they're like the visuals of Ripper, the like between him in different scenes, the beginning scene of the admiral talking to the captain, and you could see the galaxy and the universe there. Like there was lots of really good special effects that drew me in. I am also like intrigued to see more of Harry Mudd. There's they dropped the F-bomb twice, not once, but twice.
They did.
And this is exciting. These are things that they can't necessarily do on traditional television. So I'm really like excited to see this, especially in a streaming network where they have a lot more flexibility and they can just design it the way they want to direct this thing. So I love it.
I am very excited as well. I am very excited to see where this we're learning more and more about this universe pre the original cast, and I'm really like, the show is like onions. It's like every time I think I have another layer, I think I got it figured out, there's another layer under it, and there's another layer, and there's another layer. And Captain Lorca is trying to make me like him, but I still don't want to give him my trust, because I know the moment I do, the rug's going to be pulled out from under me. I'm happy that Saru and Michael are now about to be on like more frenemies, how they used to be on Jordos, where like they respected each other, had this mutual respect, but still were like, hey, I'm gunning for you. Well, I'm gunning for you too. But it was truly a camaraderie versus like you could tell there was tension there. I'm excited for Tilly to stand out a little bit more. Right now, they still have her as like a background character, and I feel like she could be more, and I really just hope they don't use her as like an emotional tool for Michael, like they kill her off and then Michael's like, Khan. So I don't want that, so I'm hoping they start to use her more. And I'm excited that we're meeting more characters. We're getting to know more people within the universe. So this episode, I loved it. I almost went on to episode 6 again because I was just so like, what is this? But I held off. I stayed strong. Because again, if you're the first time listening to this episode, I have never seen Star Trek Discovery, so I'm watching it as we do these podcasts. I'm only watching it the day before we record, so it's very hard not to binge this, so that way I can make sure I truly understand what's going on. So again, I am Andrea,
and I'm Monica Pinkin,
and make sure you follow us. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts as well. So follow, subscribe, and check us out, and live long and prosper. Bye.
Bye.